Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, Senior Contributing Editor, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Google. It's titled, Milpitas Unified School District Shares Results and Advice for Going Google. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First of all, you should know that we are having some technical issues with the slides, and so behind the scenes, I think what the audience is seeing is working fine, but if there are any hiccups as the slides come through, the speakers will let you know, but we are working on it, and hopefully it will run smoothly. So just be prepared for that. I also just want to let you know that today's event will be recorded. In a couple of days, you'll receive an email containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation. And one final note is please do ask questions, and you don't have to feel as if you have to wait until the end to do so. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the submit button. I hope we'll have about 15 minutes or so at the end when our speakers can answer your questions. We also have a chat function which can be launched via the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Use that chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or other concerns. But don't please use the chat function to ask the panelists questions. They won't have time to monitor the chat. Use the Q&A panel instead, please. And with that out of the way, I want to welcome our speakers. Angela Mecca is a regional manager for the Google and Education team, working with school districts in California, Oregon, and Alaska. She began a career in Buffalo, where she worked for Ingram Micro before moving to the Bay Area to work at a software-as-a-service startup. Our second speaker, Chin Song, is Director of Technology for Milpitas Unified School District, where he and his team develop and implement strategies to make learning efficient, effective, and engaging for students. In previous jobs, Chin served as a teacher, manager, board member, and an advisor to numerous companies. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Angela Mecca. Well, welcome, Angela. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to be able to speak on this webinar. So without further ado, I guess we'll just get started. So on the Google for Education team, we think about this number a lot, 60%. But really, what is 60%? Well, researchers estimate that 60% of students today will have jobs that do not yet exist. Now, many of the tech roles that we're in today didn't exist when I was in school, and many non-technology roles have changed dramatically, often as a result of the adoption of technology. So conventional thinking on education is no longer enough, and that needs to change. Research and information dissemination have already evolved and will continue to change. So we need to teach our kids the tools to be successful, collaboration, research, etc. Now, technology has already transformed the way that we communicate, participate, and experience the world. Technology removes barriers. When I was growing up, all research took place in an encyclopedia. But technology opens up new worlds and allows users to explore more deeply. So the first image here is highlighting Google Hangouts. And now Hangouts with military parents can actually connect them to their children learning from far away. The second image is of the Google Art Project. And with the Google Art Project, you can bring the Art Institute of Chicago directly to your students and zoom in on a Sunday on the ground shot to see and study the detailed brushstrokes used. The third image is the Connected Classrooms Initiative, which allows classes to go on virtual field trips. And lastly, we don't all have the luxury of going to the Galapagos Islands to learn about sea turtles in person, but we can all open up Chrome on any device and travel to map treks to explore and learn about places in the world. So what can we do to help transform education? Google's mission statement is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And we believe that open technology is the key to improving education. Now, open technology means device agnostic, limitless information, anytime, anywhere access, affordable, and having open APIs which allow developers to build on top of solutions. So what does it mean for schools to go Google? We asked schools, and they told us it's about more than just technology. It's about adopting a culture that extends beyond the classroom walls, about openness, curiosity, and working together. Going Google in education really means 4 things. First, empowerment. How do we empower students, teachers, schools to discover a world of infinite resources and change the role of the teacher from disseminating information to coaching and supporting students as they explore the information accessible to them to solve real-world problems. Next, choice. Being able to use the right device anytime, anywhere, regardless of where they're logging in from. Only if students have reliable access to a device can teachers really change the way that they teach. We want teachers and students to use the right device, whether that means a laptop, tablet, phone, or desktop, in school, at home, or on the go. Teamwork. Working together in real time using Google's collaborative productivity suite is called out over and over again as the most profound change in the way that teachers teach and the way that students learn. And lastly, scale, making sure that these solutions are affordable and easy to manage, because device price matters, and low-cost solutions give more students an opportunity to go Google. So I'd like you to think about those key elements that make this possible. How do you empower students and teachers to access quality digital content that they need to be creative and self-driven? When you have access to quality digital content, it really empowers students and gives teachers tools for individualized learning. It's important to help students to discover the world of infinite resources and really change the role of the teacher. Now, all of a student's information and learning environment should be accessible and secure, whether they're using a device in the class, a desktop computer in the library, or a computer or laptop at home. We want the technology to get out of the way so that students and teachers can focus on the content and on working together. So Google's solutions work across many platforms, so schools can use their existing equipment and keep their options open even as they commit to new device deployments. So how do you take collaboration to the next level with real-time, across the world, anytime, anywhere access? Now with Google Docs, multiple students can work together in the same document at the same time. This makes schoolwork more like real work. Students can learn more by working with a set of classmates with diverse perspectives, and they learn how to get group work done. Who is the leader? Who is the editor? Who has the right to change the work? These discussions are the same kind they will have at university and at work.
Angela, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to, so Angela, we are getting a lot of feedback from people that they're unable to see the slides. So I just wanted to let them know that we are trying to fix the technical problems that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and we apologize that you can't see the slides right now. Angela, please continue as we try and resolve this issue. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, no problem, Andrew. Thanks for letting me know. So the last thing that I was going to talk about, and I'll try to keep this as engaging as possible without slides, but the last point that I was going to touch on is the scalability piece. How do you make sure that all this technology is easy to manage? So how do you manage thousands of users, bringing in thousands of devices? How do you deploy and maintain those devices? And how do you deploy apps, books, or other content at scale? Now, all of our devices are quick and easy to set up. With Google Apps for Education as the core foundation, It's easy to manage 10 or 10,000 devices from the admin console. Now from the Chrome Web Store for Chromebooks or the Google Play for Education Store, you can deploy apps via the cloud. And because the devices are really intuitive to use, the students get started with them quickly. So there's no need to run around and do troubleshooting in every classroom. You can actually deploy relevant content with just a few clicks. And Google offers 24/7 phone support to help the admin out if there are any challenges. Now this is the sort of offering that means you can roll out IT for schools at scale. Now when you think back to classrooms 50 plus years ago, you can really see how far technology has come. So I remember doing a report as a freshman in high school on mitochondria and having to go to my school's library to check out books on the topic and not being able to take the encyclopedias home because they were reference materials. So I had to do all of my research in one room. Now all students have to do is speak the word mitochondria into a voice search, and Google will pull up all the information that they need anytime, any place. So a lot has changed. And when we take a look at the classroom, though, we realize that a lot of times not that much has changed in terms of learning environments. Now technology can help transform education and move it from the past to the future. But let's not forget that real change requires people, and people need to change. So one thing that we try to do is help the technology get out of the way by making it simple, making it secure, and making it seamless across the core platform, the devices that access that platform, and the content that you access through those devices. So obviously we think that this complete approach sets us apart from competitors that might just focus on one or two of these key elements, leaving you to deal with the gap. And our customers agree. Almost 40 million students, faculty, and staff use our Google Apps for Education platform. 1 in 5 devices shipped to U.S. students this year was a Chromebook, which is built to access the platform. And 74 out of top 100 universities in the U.S. have gone Google. So the suite that we offer schools is called Google Apps for Education. And this includes things like Gmail as your email service provider, things like docs, spreadsheets, and presentations for content creation. Since Google Apps are all web-based, it means that they're available from any device with a web browser. They're also great for collaborating because multiple people can be creating and editing at the same time. And did I mention that it's free? We don't charge for any of these services for teachers, staff, or students. Now with the Google Apps for Education admin console, you have one central web page to manage your users, your organizational units, and manage the settings of Google Apps. Now Chromebooks are web-based computers that are really great for schools because they're easy to use, easy to manage, easy to customize, and easy to scale. So we've designed Chromebooks in Education to be practically invisible in the classroom. With Chromebooks, students open the lid, sign in, and they're up and running in under 8 seconds. 8 seconds. This is such a critical fact because even taking a few minutes to load is too much time when you start thinking about doing that every day of the school year. So Chromebooks allow you to dedicate more time to teaching and instruction. And when you're using Chromebooks, everything is stored on the web, so it doesn't matter which machine you use. With Chromebooks, the focus is on the user, not on the device. And when your student signs into any Chromebook, they're taken to the learning experience that you've designed for them based on your curriculum goals. Chromebooks are really great because they're incredibly simple for both faculty and students. And their adopters say that they love the devices because they just work, and they'll continue to just work because the devices are web-based and nothing is stored on the device itself, meaning it's impossible to catch a virus. So we offer a wide range of Chromebook devices. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the variety that we have because the hardware specs on each of them is a little bit different. So they'll vary in terms of screen size, ports, weight, etc. but all of them are running the Chrome operating system, and all of them are managed through your Google Apps for Education account using a Chrome management license. Now the management license is $30 per Chrome device that you have. So $30 per device, and it's a one-time fee. And despite the differences in hardware that Chrome devices might have, the user experience and the management experience should essentially be the same. Now on November 13th, 2013, we expanded our offering to include tablets with Google Play for Education. So our team worked with schools to ensure that this solution of tablet devices, content, and management was truly designed for learning and made for the classroom. So you'll find many of the similar features of Google for Education tools like ease of management and a whole set of features that make this solution perfect for the classroom. We've identified 3 problem areas that schools have when deploying tablets, and we've tried to address those with this solution. So first, deployment. Using near-field communications, schools can now simply bump tablets back to back to set up user profiles, Wi-Fi, and settings. Second was the discovery of relevant content. How do you empower the teacher to go find classroom-approved content through the unique Google Play for Education web store? And lastly, delivering that content to student tablets through purchases with POs, not credit cards. And teachers can actually deploy apps to one student, one class, or an entire district with just a few clicks. Now this unique tablet solution has 2 components. There's the hardware and the educator tools. When you buy approved tablets through Google for Education, as part of the program you get access to Google Play for Education, which is a special store that's been designed with quality educational content. So there's a couple ways that you can discover content in the Google Play for Education store. So first you can filter by specific apps like setting criteria around subject, grade level, and if it's math or ELA, you can sort by Common Core standard. So when you filter like this, you're finding apps that have been teacher approved for the classroom. You can also sort by keyword. So you can purchase apps using a PO, so no more credit cards. And many of the apps are free. To send a free app to a student or group, it works the same as paid apps. So you click an app, click Learn More, click Continue, and then you simply send to a select group of students. So we offer a deck called 75 Apps for Your Class, and you can simply search for 75 Apps for Your Class in a Google search, and it should pull it up because it's a public presentation. But this free online presentation highlights teacher tools, student tools, and literacy apps, the sorts of apps that every teacher needs. Educators often ask where they can find the right apps that will help them be more productive. And they're also looking for tools for students that they can use to create, research, analyze, and communicate. You'll find thousands of these apps in Google Play for Education. And I think that the slides may have just come back in time to introduce Chin Song, who is the Director of Technology at Milpitas Unified.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking a slice of your day to share some of the ideas and innovations and some of the data that we have since we've gone Google. One of the striking things that's not in the slide for those of you guys who can see it is essentially in 2011 we thought about how to shrink some of the educational time that is being taken away by walking to labs and logging into computers that take a while to boot. And essentially we've cut on average about 5 minutes per 50-minute class. So essentially that's 10% of your class. So when you extrapolate that out, that can be as much as 18 days a year, right? So just kind of think about that scale. So let me just go through our schools and our school numbers. We have in Milpitas Unified, we're about an hour south of San Francisco, and we have 9 elementary schools, and we have 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, an adult education, as well as pre-kindergarten classes, and we run the gamut as well. So we have 10,000 students and 700 staff, which essentially we serve with 2.5 technicians. So we have a relatively small staff for those of you guys who have larger tech staffs, or even 1 at each site. So just keep that in mind as well. And we couldn't have done this without going with the Google suite of things as well. And when we thought about first kind of how do we revolutionize education, reinvent it, so on and so forth, what does that reform look like? And we thought about how 20th century education was being done, right? It was very sequential, and it's a fixed use of time, much like a lot of your classrooms, the whole cells and bells model, right? So as you progress from kindergarten through 12th grade, so let's say, for example, in 5th grade, there's 180 days, and you spend about 6 hours a day, where the time itself is constant and the learning is variable. So we thought about how do we flip that around and say, okay, in a competency-based learning and in mastery learning environment, how do we vary that, right? So instead of thinking about 5th grade, we're thinking about 5th grade standards and saying, how do we collapse 180, for some kids who take 180 days to learn 5th grade standards. Some kids take 150 days to learn the standards, and some kids take even longer, 220 days, as an example. And then we brought in blended learning as a tool and said, let's make where learning itself is constant, and then time is variable. So then from there, we started to think about the flow of information, right? In the traditional sense, how that information flows is from information, skills, and knowledge that is gathered by the teacher, and then it is shared to the student. But rather today, that's a little more circular, where the power is to the student, where they essentially can collect, gather, and inform at the same time that the teacher can, right? So where this is much more of a student-centered learning, and then it shifts the control of access of information, and it also shifts who controls the time. In this case, the student. And so there's some learning principles that we have. It's the classic 4 C's, right? That's out there in education. And we start to think about how do we, help kids communicate, collaborate, critically think, and how do we foster creativity? And the shift was towards student-centered learning. Right now, I laugh every time I say that, because what else centered learning would it be? It's almost like in healthcare. They oftentimes say patient-centered. I'm like, what other centered should it be? And then seamless use of technology is very important. And then the flexible use of time, space, and grouping of students. So in many of our classrooms, we no longer have the classic 20 to 30 kids in a classroom, but rather they're in different stations, and then they may even be in one single room with 120 to 140 kids in a learning lab as well. And then how do we use that data to inform instruction? And I really like what Buckminster Fuller said, and essentially in terms of mindsets and how do we transform people's thoughts into action. Right? So he said, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. And so, connected to that, on the design model of learning, we thought about the PPDSH. And for those of you guys who are not familiar, it's people, procedures, data, software, and hardware. And I'm going to focus on the last three of the pieces, which is the data, software, and hardware. And on the data piece, what type of data can we get to push out to our students? and then which software do we use and which hardware do we use. And so the data and software is the Google Apps for Education, and the hardware piece is Chromebooks and Chromebox, which we can use seamlessly along with our Google User ID. And so our thought is, how do we reduce friction? For those of you guys who golf, you know that if you can get into the rough, it's a little tough, right? So depending upon where you are, you want to make it as smooth as possible so you can get the best shot off. And so for us, to reduce that friction, we started thinking, how can we have devices and software essentially where it's frictionless, much like a hockey puck on an ice, right? And so device-wise, using Chromebooks has allowed us to have virtually no ongoing patches, and then the updates are constantly streaming. And then also, when we first started, our defect ratio was under 1% for unintentional damages, and still we have a defect ratio of under 2% system-wide. And we have over 6,000 devices, that's both in Chromebooks as well as tablets. And then we started to go the one-to-any paradigm. I know a lot of you guys are either in or thinking about one-to-one, but since we're not a well-funded district, we had to go to one-to-any, where the user ID essentially becomes the computing environment for students. And just to give you a timeline of where we've been and where we think we're going to go, is back in 2011, we decided to switch to Google Apps. And also at that time, we had no wireless network at all until 2012. And in April 2012, we made the switch to Google Apps, and we started to test the Chromebooks. In 2012 of August, the new school year, we finished our installation of district-wide wireless, and then we got our first batch of 1,000 Chromebooks. And today, we have over 6,000 devices. That's either a Chromebook or an Android tablet, and are fairly happy with that. And infrastructure, we started to think, what type of density are we thinking? So we put an access point in every room to make sure that 100% of our classrooms were covered with wireless. But the intention there is to make every space a learning space. And we started to increase our internet bandwidth. Initially, we started by upgrading our 100 meg circuit to 1 gigs. And now we have 2 independent gigs, one for students and staff, and the other complete for guests. And that's for student phones and for staff phones, and bring your own devices as well. And we implemented cross-campus SSID, so if a student goes from one campus to another, they don't have to worry about discovering a new wireless access point. And then install Google Apps, where the integration was super important. And then the account authentication was just simply a single sign-in with Google, so we didn't have to have multiple sign-in. There's a question, can we make the sign-ins easier for kids? And all of our kindergarten students are actually logging in with their user ID and password. And our user ID scheme is their first and last initial with a 5-digit student ID. And sometimes if you want to make that a little bit easier, you can work with your IT department to shorten that even further. And then the trust is a big model of ours, where our technicians actually can perform administrative tasks in terms of resetting IDs, and then other tasks like adding apps as well. And then we delved into security, right? And security is super important to us. And we filter through Meraki, and then also a company called Securely as well. And we have a fair number of devices that go one-to-one, and there's a take-home. So we do have a mix. And the policy on Google Dashboard, that continues to be iterated, because Google actually takes our suggestions very seriously, and then works with schools to try to think about how to make it even better. But the most important part is the experience part. How do we make it human-centered, or student-centered in our case, and teacher-centered as well? And how do we make it more common sense driven, and then make the devices completely reliable and really focus on the collaborative nature. And since we've gone Google, there's been millions of collaborative documents, and students continue to use like the chat function in an academic way. Of course, you know, kids are kids and they'll chat amongst themselves, but if they're chatting about how the lesson is not engaging, then perhaps the teacher should know as well. And so we started thinking about like the infrastructure piece and carts and charging, and then planned obsolescence in 3 to 4 years. And then what type of training do we do? I know that's in the forefront, or a question that you guys have. And essentially what we did was we put it out there and asked people, how many of you have ever accessed Gmail, Yahoo Mail, Hotmail, or any of the webmail services? And initially, the administrators were a little bit wary of going to Google. They're like, well, our teachers, you know, I don't know if they can actually use web-based tools. And then we put it out there and then realized that essentially no training was necessary. And a lot of people simply would ask each other and then overcome a lot of the hurdles by just going on YouTube. We do have some teacher coaches, technology coaches, and they do go out and will help people one-to-one to accelerate their learning even further. So the thought behind us is that we're using the flexible learning paradigm to make sure that the kids can go from, or the students can go from place to place, and as well as teachers can go from space to space, so every space becomes a learning environment. And then when we started to measure how much content do kids actually gather on their devices, in the first 8 months, there were 220 devices that were out to our high school for the one-to-one program. And in essence, they've accessed 53 million pages that they looked at. Not all of them academic, but 80% was. And 240,000 pages per student, which translates to like 1,100 different resource articles per day, right? So if you start doing the calculation on that, they're effectively doing a lot of quick searches, and this is including like Google searches, information, but think about that, right? Traditionally, where would those questions go, right? Or how would they ask that question? When I was going to school, it was the encyclopedia, right? Would have to walk to the library, look, search, and perhaps ask an adult. Today, they just have it on their fingertips, and just like what Angela was saying, just simply speak it, and the answer usually comes out. If they need clarification, that's where the teacher's role would come in, and explaining it even further. And so let me just briefly talk about or share with you some of the examples that we have in schools. So we started to build learning labs, even more flexible spaces, oftentimes combining two to three classrooms together. And then have the one-to-one model as well as the one-to-any model. And for those of you guys who have access to the slides, I'm going through some of the projects that we have and what the kids are doing. So for example, persuasive writing in 3rd through 6th grades. Kids are, coming together, and on Google Sites and Google Docs, they're putting their writing together as a team. As a matter of fact, some of our 5th and 6th grade students are doing Google Hangouts with our 1st grade students, modeling their book reports. So that's also been pretty phenomenal. And thinking about some of research that's happening in our schools, the research is live, the students could see it, they share it with their classmates. And in K-12, we actually use Google Classroom as a light learning management system, as well as trying to help teachers organize their work, and they're finding that to be very helpful as well. And in assessment and evaluation space, our teachers use Google Forms, as well as other web-based methods to assess and evaluate. And today, students are doing presentations, and they're actually sharing things cross-culturally through different time zones as well. And we have evidence where students are working with other students in different parts of the world to share their work as well. And where we find it really great is in terms of preparing them for Common Core learning, where they're able to collect and also reflect their learning and thoughts with other people. And in terms of rolling back, because right now we're all gearing up for the Common Core testing, we're able to, since we have the Chromebooks out there in the field, with our 6,000 devices, we're able to go from not being Common Core assessment ready to being ready by putting in for us the Air Secure Test module and pushing that out to all of our devices, and we can do that in 5 minutes. So, which means in our IT end, we don't have to go and touch every single device, and for the students, it's a lot less stress, both for the students as well as the teachers. And if it happens to not work, we just simply swap another device for them, or they could just reload, turn it off and turn it on, and they're back within a minute. So we found that to be like super helpful. And then in terms of the sustainability and the impact, is that I already shared with you that I didn't increase my staff, but we did add 6,000 additional devices, right? So that's very helpful on both the sustainability aspect. But more on the student side, it's the student engagement piece that's super important, and the fact that they own their work and they're able to share it with their parents, as well as they're able to share with other people that that they find helpful. And then we can also customize some of the learning opportunities that students have. Give you an example of Google Classroom, but teachers also use Google Sites, Blogger, and different opportunities that they find online as well. And their digital footprint now gets bigger, and also now their portfolio is building, right, year after year after year, and our teachers can go back and see what they've done. And so now they're what we would call 21st century ready. And for the educators, it's much easier to align their Common Core initiatives, and we're Smarter Balance ready, right? And by students being very familiar with the device, it lessens the cognitive load. So when they're going into a testing situation, they're not thinking about how do I use a particular device. They're already familiar with it. And then the accountability aspect is that they get the instant feedback and the assessment, both great for the teachers as well as the students. And then the organization and management, I mentioned it several times. That's one of the gems that people realize after they've put in Google Apps for Education and then getting in the Chromebook ecosystem. So that's it on my side. Anything else that you have, Angela?
Well, Chin, let me thank you and Angela both for your presentation. Chin, I think we had the slides all running for your presentation, and Angela, I'm glad you managed to soldier on even though we were having some of those difficulties with the slides earlier on. For the audience who did experience some issues with the slides, we do have a PDF of all the slides that will be sent to you in an email in a day or so. So you will be able to see the slides that you missed. There will also be a recording of the presentation. I hope it hasn't been affected by some of the technical issues. We will take a look at it and clean it up as much as we can to make it as clean as possible. But thank you, Angela and Chin, for carrying on despite some of these issues. We still have a little over 20 minutes to handle some of the questions that came in from the audience, and so why don't we tackle as many of those as we can. Chin, the first question, that you made reference to a 2% defect rate, keeping the defect rate less than 2%. And we had a couple of people who wrote in asking maybe for a little more information about that 2%. Does it mean in a given year that there are fewer than 2% of devices needed screen replacement or other repairs, or what exactly does it mean? And then someone else wrote in and saying that they'd seen a webinar from a school in a district in New Jersey that experienced a 20 to 30% defect rate. Can you just talk about some of the things, what you mean by 2% and how you achieve that low rate?
Sure. So I don't know about the 20-something%. It'd be hard pressed for us to sustain, right, at that rate. So 2% includes all types of breakage, including screen replacement and other repairs, keyboard repairs, trackpad repairs, any of those, or even like students just simply dropping them, and that's inclusive of our students taking them home and having the one-to-one device. Although our one-to-one device, our defect rate on that is about 3 to 4% on any given year, but that itself is very low. And I know there was a question of how do we handle that? Because it's a learning tool, we just simply give them another Chromebook device, and then we'll figure out what to do, on the back end in terms of collecting fees for that particular unit. However, for the one-to-one units, students opt into a $20 insurance that we do in-house. At 6,000 units, there has to be an awful lot of units that's being broken for us to lose funding for that, and that's on a yearly basis. So that's about 2% on a yearly basis. So we're looking at, on a 4-year rolling basis, we're looking at less than 8%. And then even there, from there, we're looking at replacing different parts from different, or in the same model of Chromebooks. So those repairs go rather fast, and it oftentimes doesn't cost us any money, right? For the smaller school districts, you may want to look at external warranty options, but for larger systems with over 1,000, oftentimes it makes more sense to do it in-house.
Terrific. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Let me turn to something a little more specific about Google Drive and some of the apps. The question about collaborative work. When you're using Google Apps such as Google Drive, when students are working collaboratively on a project, can a teacher or an administrator view the input of each individual student to that collaborative project?
The answer is yes, if the students share that document. However, there are software that's out there that allows you to see what everyone is working on. However, by using Google Classroom, you're able to have that sharing function, and that's automatically done just by simply having your document on there. Plus, you can do what's called a carbon copy. So essentially, you load it one time, and every single student has access to that particular copy. But it's a different copy for each student, and when they submit, they're submitting it to you. And oftentimes, how our teachers use that is that our English teachers use that to iterate their work rather than giving a final grade, right? So they'll give a comment and say, hey, you can fix this, and then students will work in line with the teacher asynchronously, which helps for those students who cannot be or who cannot come and get direct help from the student or teachers after school, like athletes, for example.
Okay. All right. And what about when what can be done with the Chromebook when it is not connected, when it is not online and connected to the network? Are students able to continue working on their Chromebook?
So there's some offline apps, and also Google Docs works offline. So when it does come back online, it'll just simply sync. But we try to keep our uptime at greater than 99%. So that's less of an issue. And the few times that does happen, let's say we have a storm coming through. Or for us in California, an earthquake, right? That knocks that out. We ask teachers to think about alternative activities that they can do instead. Okay, great. And let's switch gears again. Professional development when it comes to implementing new technologies has often been an issue. How did teachers in Milpitas react
to going Google? You know, what kind of professional development did you offer them, and how did it go?
So we have both in-person as well as online professional development. But for the basic Google tools, right, so you have the Gmail, Google Drive suite of tools, the spreadsheet, forms, docs, presentation. We thought there was going to be a much more of a demand than there actually is. And so, like I said, again, it's teachers are oftentimes asking each other, and then they're also going online. Actually, the biggest resistance and mindset change was from administrators, not thinking that their teachers can actually do a lot of the stuff that they're doing today. And roughly today we have, even with our blended learning schools, at some levels, I mean, we have some form of blended learning in every single one of our schools, right? Which is super powerful, and it wasn't and for most of our school, it wasn't prompted by the district office. And so once you start putting the right tools in students' hands, they flourish, and then teachers as well, right? So once teachers got a hold of this, they're like, hey, this is much better than, you know, making 180 copies. I can just hit send, and they have it, and they can work on it in any time, any space, and I could see it much faster. So once they see the value proposition, they quickly come around.
Can you, talking about blended learning, can you talk a little bit more about how you're using blended learning in Milpitas, and is it something that's being used at every grade level, K through 12?
Yes. So there's different forms of blended learning. I'll just give you a quick rundown, which is one is the lab rotation model, where I'll just throw out a number. 12 students from a class of 36 would leave to a learning lab and work on an adaptive software that's available, and it's different for each school. For us, it's iReady, and some of them work on like Khan Academy. And so then teachers will get that data back to adjust and inform their instruction. But now, effectively, instead of having a class of 36, they have a class of 24, right? And so that's a lab rotation model. Some classes use the in-class rotation, which they break down into 3 to 4 groups. And then a smaller group of 12 students might be working with the teacher directly, while the other is self-directed learning, and the other is like project-based learning, like a group learning. And then they can rotate within that period. Some split their classes in half. Some use a combined method and then bring their classes into the learning labs, where you'll have 2 to 3 teachers from different grade levels or the same grade level, and then having collaborative work between their student groups, and then also between subject matters as well. So it happens on different levels. And yes, it happens kindergarten all the way through 12th grade.
Okay, terrific. Switching gears to something a little more technical, how do you handle printing? What are the network and the hardware needs that you have?
Oh, this one was a fun one. Although you can print from the Chromebooks, we actually universally made a decision that no printing is allowed, which made it much easier for us. But the backlash was crazy, right? Because everyone wanted to print and show student work. But then once they realized that, because the goal was for students to share their work with each other, right, and maybe even with their parents. But once they realized, hey, they can actually see it on their Google sites and also on Blogger, much less resistance. And then from there, once they realized that if they really needed to print, they have printers in class that students can share. They can do so. They can also print from the front office if they really wanted to. But what we saw was that there was a precipitous drop in terms of printing. As a matter of fact, our print volume is now half.
And in in terms of the longevity of the devices, of the Chromebooks you put in place, how long are you planning as a district? What is the formula you're using for how long a device will last before you replace it?
So we're looking at 3+2. So we essentially say about 3 to 4 to 5 years, depending upon where they're going to sit, right? So we know that battery life on mobile devices, they decrease over time. However, the units may be complete. We have 3-year models out there that's still holding a 4+ hour battery charge. So essentially, with those devices, once they get to the 3-hour range, we'll plug them in the classroom and then use them as desktops as long as they go. Or some of them, we just use them as repair units. So we're looking at, on the average, if you want to have a number, 4 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. What about emails? And one of the audience members wants to know, how do you filter student email?
So filtering is done at several levels, right? Spam is already being filtered by Google and their algorithms. There's no way to block all the emails, but we also, I think it may be a combination of emails as well as emails that are coming in externally. For our grades, kindergarten through 6th grade, our elementary, they cannot receive emails outside our domain. So anything that is outside the school district, they won't be able to receive. And so we just kind of passively, or that's the active nature of that. However, we also find it very, we open it up to middle schools and above, and for us, that's 7th grade and above. And for those students, we rely heavily on their, digital citizenship and their ability to filter as well. Of course, that doesn't stop any type of, negative emails that come through. And oftentimes, and I'm going to birdwalk a little bit onto policies that our teachers and administrators wanted to put in, which is also to suspend student accounts when there's, let's say, a mean email that goes between students, because they can email between each other. But as a general policy, we don't suspend students' accounts for that unless it's a criminal or a very dangerous email that may lead to something else even more dangerous. We treat it like a note, a mean note that was written by a paper, and we try to use the human approach, right, and simply counsel students with the adult voice.
Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to, I believe that the sign-in is often an email address. One of our audience members wanted to know if, for younger students, is it possible to set up a shorter sign-in than an email address?
Oh, absolutely. So that's, I mentioned that earlier, where work with your IT, and they can go in the control panel and make anything as short as you'd like. Okay.
All right. So that is something that can be done on-site by the on-site school IT department.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And what about, and this is completely changing tack, but what about, what do you do at Milpitas with student e-portfolios? Do you have a process or any guidelines in place for archiving these?
So they're simply on Google Sites. And with Google Sites, there's a template that we have. This goes from kinder, first, second, third, right? And then they just keep that Google Sites until they graduate.
Okay. All right, and we're coming up with about 5 minutes left, so we have time for a few more questions. And you have already talked a bit about keeping the less than 2% defect rate. What do you do when a student takes a device home, for instance, and it breaks while they're at home? What happens at that point?
Well, most of our students, they have another device, whether it's a parent device or another computing device that they have at home. And imagine if this happens over a weekend, they can always go to the library. But the great thing is the learning that happens and the software that's available, it's always on the cloud, right? So they can actually go anywhere and access their content, and it's never lost. So we don't have to necessarily worry about like a hard drive failure. But when that does happen, then they would come back to school on Monday, and we usually have some loaner devices that they can check out.
Okay. And in terms of replacement for that, I think you may have mentioned during the presentation, was there a $50 fee per school year? Was that one of the audience members wondered about that? Is that
yeah, so it's a $20 fee that students opt into. About 90% of our students do. We actually, for our scale, we only need about 60% of our students, and this is only for one-to-one devices, right? To make it worthwhile. So essentially, at $20 a piece for any of the Chromebooks that we have, if we were to completely replace one, we'd have to have a 10%, 10% defect rate, which we don't have.
So for doing repairs, do you do the repairs in-house? What happens with a device that needs repair?
So with the repairs, we do them in-house, and there's tons of YouTube videos that our techs have looked up, and oftentimes it's a 5-minute fix. It's very rare where we have to fix, it takes more than 30 minutes to fix a device. As a matter of fact, in some schools, they're teaching students how to fix the devices, and they just simply have parts on stack, or you can order them from a variety of places, and then fix them in-house as well. A little more difficult with smaller schools, or if you have less than 100 devices, it's maybe better just ship it out if you don't have the expertise in-house.
Okay. All right. Here's a question that it may be better suited for Angela to answer. Whether an individual can purchase a Chromebook and then get Google Play for Education.
So Google Play for Education is actually specific to schools that are using Google Apps for Education and managed devices. So it's not something that's available for an individual. You can certainly access the consumer Chrome web store, and if it's an Android tablet, the consumer Google Play Store, but you won't be able to find educational content that has been approved by teachers and given an educational badge. That's something that is only for Google Apps for Education districts that have managed devices. So whether that's a managed Chromebook or a managed Android tablet for education, they have to have at least one managed license in order to access the Play for Education store.
Terrific. Thank you, Angela, for explaining that. Let me come back to Chin. We have time for probably one more question, and that is, it comes back to this whole question of emails that we touched on earlier. How are students restricted from signing out of their domain account and then signing in to a personal Gmail account?
So if they have a personal Gmail account, they can just sign into their domain and then sign in their personal. Right? It's we try to. That's one of our, I guess, core pillars is to trust the students. And if they want to get into their personal Gmail account for lower grades, we've hardly ever seen that happen. But for high school students who have multiple accounts, it works the same way as adults, right? They can have their student, and then if you want to log into a Gmail account, you can. There are ways to block that, but we choose not to.
And once students graduate or leave the district, do they get to take those student documents and their email messages with them, or do those stay with the school?
So we encourage all of our graduates to use Google Takeout. And by doing that, Google will zip all your mail as well as all your docs into one neat folder. And then you can open that with a variety of open source tools that they choose to open them in. So everything's packable.
Great. Well, thank you. And unfortunately, that's about all the time that we have left today. I want to apologize again for those early technical issues we had with the slideshows. And just to remind you that those slideshows, the slides themselves will be available in a PDF that is emailed out to you along with a link to the recording. And you should get that email in a day or so. And again, I apologize for those early technical difficulties. And as we wrap up, I just want to thank Angela Mecca and Chin Song for their excellent presentations under duress. And I would also like to thank Google for its support. And that wraps it up. This is the end of our hour. So thank you all, and this concludes today's webcast. Goodbye.